I'm sure if you listen to this podcast, you've probably heard what was happening while I was writing this episode on Friday night. Brisbane is hunkering down in preparation for a cyclone, which never came, which is so rare here that we haven't had one in decades. Schools, workplaces, public transport, and even Maccas are all closed, and the coast is being absolutely battered.
No, not Macca's.
Not the Mickeys.
Not the Mickeys.
Where am I going to get my chippies?
Gotta go to McDonald's.
McDonald's.
I got to get me weekly serving of nuggies.
Weekly. While it's a rarity here in Brisbane, our friends to the north are much more acquainted with the big spinny boys. North Queensland and Western Australia certainly have their fair share, but if you talk about destructive cyclones in Australia, there is one that stands above the rest. This particular cyclone ruined Christmas for Darwin in 1974 and left in its wake a level of destruction that can be barely understood by people today. This week on special Cyclone edition of Cheeky Tales, we spin into the story of Cyclone Tracy.
Nice.
You like that one?
You already hit a pun.
I like the special edition.
Yeah.
2 weeks late, as we always are.
Yeah, I wrote this episode in preparation of us being able to record on the Sunday, and then the cyclone was just like, I'm going to just hold on out here for a while. And it just sort of hung off the coast for an extra 4 days. Yeah. Was it 4 days or 3 days?
I like how you say it never came. It
did
come.
It did.
Yeah, but it didn't hit as a cyclone.
You sound like everybody in the safe suburbs of Brisbane. They're like, the little bit of rain.
Oh, we missed out.
Meanwhile, yeah.
No, it didn't hit Brisbane properly. It hit it as a tropical low.
It's still, I know, but it still hit Brisbane. Like, even if it hit it as a tropical low, it dumped like 1,000 mils of rain. It destroyed half of the Gold Coast. It killed Wynnum, Manly West, South, destroyed their power, their trees, their fences. Okay. It demolished Harvey Bay.
I'm not saying nothing happened, but it didn't hit the way that a cyclone hits. It didn't hit as a cyclone.
Ignorant,
Cyclone Alfred. I just thought we'd name it since you had named it.
Yeah, we had named it.
Yeah, Cyclone Alfred.
Yeah, or Alfie.
Alpha,
not Alpho. Go to the pub and get a palm.
You shush, not Alpho.
Alpho's a hard no.
Yeah, we don't go to the pub and get a palmo.
Cheeky says no to Alpho.
There was this whole discussion.
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
Palmo.
Okay. This week I was looking back through some of our old shorts and I came across the one where I started telling a story and you're like, yeah, I know. Why are you telling me? And you're doing it again.
Yeah. Okay.
Sean and I had an argument about whether it was Palmy or Palmer. And then
Palmo.
Well, the problem is
Aaron's menu that had Palmo.
Aaron's been gaslighting me for years that he apparently insists that I have only ever said Palmer and not Palmy, and he thinks that that's just normal. I've never once said Palmer in my damn life unless I'm talking about a type of ham.
Palmer.
And he's been gaslighting me like, no, mate, you're the one that always says Palmer. I'm like,
Kirsty's been doing that to me. She swears I used to have barbecue sauce on Silverside. I'm like, no. It's only tomato sauce. It's like literally
that's insane.
Both are incorrect. What are you doing?
A toasted sandwich, you put a bit of tomato sauce on the toasted sandwich.
Tomato sauce has 5 applications. Ready? Hot chips, bakery pastries or treats, depending on how you look at it. Snags at Bunnings. Also snags at Bunnings because I can't remember.
And sports drink.
I can't remember a fourth one. Or
Silverside.
and to make other sauce.
No, well, usually I'm just a straight barbecue sauce.
Yeah.
But Silverside, tomato sauce.
Tomato sauce. Okay.
Because we're too lazy to make white sauce.
Fair enough. Yeah.
But it's also great for leftovers the next day.
I like a nice cream mustard.
Yeah, I'm a mustard guy.
Chuck it on make a toasted sandwich.
Oh yeah, it's great on toasted.
And then
yeah.
put tomato sauce with that. It's beautiful.
Yeah. I've never been a big dead horse guy. I know that a lot of people love tomato sauce. I'm so specific about it. But now I just want a Silverside toasted sandwich. Yeah. But I want mustard on it.
Now try it with tomato. Yeah, give it a crack.
Yeah, okay.
Anyway, it was hard to get in Darwin after the cyclone? Tomato sauce. So.
I'm going to say everything was hard to get
in Darwin. Yeah, it was. Dude, so before we get into it,
because it destroyed a certain percentage of the buildings that we're about to find out.
Yeah, you are. I watched a documentary from the ABC on Cyclone Tracy.
Congratulations.
Yeah, the footage is
confronting.
Yeah, it's wiped out. Yeah, we're going to get into it, but the just the sheer, all the wide shots of all the suburbs is insane. Looks like a war zone.
I really kind of wish my phone wasn't used to record this because I kind of want to call Dad because he was there.
Yeah.
My dad was in the cleanup for Cyclone Tracy, and he said it was very confronting.
I actually thought we should get your dad primed, but then being the earliest recording we've ever done.
Yep, and they're on
9 a.m.
Yeah, but my dad's 75.
Yeah, he would have been up at 4.
He's already walked to the servo, gotten the paper, and potentially done a load of washing, and he's on holiday.
Maybe we could do that as a supplemental content.
We could do that as a supplemental
Do an interview with your dad.
Yeah, we'll call Dad,
Yeah. All right, well, what the heck is a cyclone anyway? Tropical cyclones go by many names. Hurricanes, typhoons, tropical storms, cyclonic storms, tropical depressions. These are all the same name for tropical cyclones throughout the world. They are basically just big-ass storms that spin around a low-pressure area in the centre. In the southern hemisphere, they rotate clockwise, and in the northern, counterclockwise. They form over large, warm bodies of water, which is why they generally only form over the tropic regions, with the cooler waters towards the poles blocking their formation, as well as some complicated physics relating to winds and the equator blocking their formation close to the equator. So there's like a band that they form in the tropics. If you've ever seen a photo of a cyclone, you know they have a distinctive shape with the spiraling clouds extending from the centre and the characteristic eye on the centre, which often is even cloud-free.
Kind of like one of our spiral galaxies.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's the same sort of like motion creates them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, yeah, if you've seen a cyclone, generally if they've got that eye, you can see through it and see to the ground below. From the ground, when a cyclone goes over, the worst conditions are on the eye edges, with the strongest winds and heaviest rain there. The outer spiraling clouds contain thunderstorms and heavy rain, and also contain the devastating winds that cause so much destruction. In the southern hemisphere, the southern side of a cyclone is the worst, and in the northern hemisphere, the northern side gets the worst conditions. So that's where the winds are like whipped by gravity as well, not gravity, but like
the air pressures and gravitational pull of the different parts of the planet. Yeah.
And it also depends which way it's moving as well. So
Yep.
if it's moving east, the eastern side is the worst.
It's the worst,
If
yes.
moving
The
west,
direction,
western
yeah.
side.
Yeah. The hemisphere plus the direction it's moving.
Yeah.
And of course, that's generally towards land.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about some cyclone records? Bottoming the leaderboard for smallest cyclone ever in terms of gale force winds from the centre, so they measure it by like where do the gale force winds end, was tropical storm Marco in 2008 in the Bay of Campeche at just 18.5 kilometres. And the largest was Typhoon Tip in the northwest Pacific Ocean at 2,220 kilometres. That is large enough to cover the US from top to bottom, from like Seattle to the bottom of, not quite the bottom of Texas, but like if you cut off Texas, that width.
For all you intrepid cyclonic fans and Cheeky Tales listeners that noticed that he just used a totally different terminology, a hurricane is a strong tropical cyclone that occurs in the Atlantic Ocean or the northeastern Pacific Ocean, and a typhoon is the same thing, but it occurs in the northwestern Pacific Ocean, in the Indian Ocean, and the South Pacific.
Basically, if it hits Asia, it's called a typhoon. If it hits the US or like the Americas, it's called a hurricane.
And if it hits us, it's a cyclone.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
It's
but
also-
if it's the side of the US as well. The Atlantic Ocean, Pacific.
Yeah, but like if it hits the US. Like,
If it hits the northwest of the US, it's still a typhoon.
is it? Do
Yeah.
they still call them typhoons?
The
up there?
northwestern Pacific Ocean.
Ah,
So the South Pacific, California, Texas, everything like that. Northwest
yeah.
of the Pacific. So like Oregon, Washington, Alaska, which they don't necessarily hit that far up, but that would be a typhoon if it hit up there. But obviously the landscape of everything, the islands and stuff, and Russia just doing weird stuff.
Yeah, Russia's too cold for.
Yeah, Russia's just
Russia's
like, no,
too far north.
we can't have that. But yeah, they would.
Also, South America doesn't get them.
Yeah.
Not very often.
There's a joke there, but I'll leave it. Typhoon Tip, great name.
Yes. And it was massive. There'll be a graphic that I put in our socials where it shows Tip and Tracy, like comparatively compared to the US, and the size difference is insane.
I just feel like Typhoon Tip could be a superhero. It just rolls off the tongue. Like it's a great
Yeah,
name.
it does feel that way.
Maybe it was Tippi Hedren, the golden age of Hollywood actress's alter ego when she was fighting crime.
Cool. What a hot and relevant reference.
Tippi Hedren going to be in the supplemental content. Hit me up, Tippi Hedren, and Slappy Sean on Instagram.
She's very dead.
She's not. Thank you very much.
Really?
Yeah.
Just very old.
Very alive.
The longest lasting cyclone, getting back to our records, was Cyclone Freddy in the Indian Ocean at 36 days. Highest winds was Cyclone Olivia in Western Australia at 408 kilometres per hour. Most rain was Cyclone Hyacinth in Reunion Island at 6,083 millimetres. That is over 6 metres of rain.
Jeez.
The most expensive in terms of damage was Hurricane Katrina at 125 bill. And the most expensive in Australia was Cyclone Yasi in Queensland at 3.6 billy. And lastly, the deadliest cyclone ever was the Bahola, I think Bahola, who knows, cyclone in East Pakistan at 500,000 deaths.
Wow.
Yeah.
I thought you were stopping at 500.
Nope. 500.
Wow.
Yeah, 500,000. So I think if I remember that one, it was like the storm surge was actually the biggest bit. So yeah, the thing with cyclones is it's not just the cyclone. There's also, because of the low pressure and like the way they move and the winds they have, they create a storm surge. So it's basically a big wave that just pushes up over the shore, similar to like how our tsunami would.
Yeah, and if that's coupled with a high tide or a king tide, yeah, pretty bad.
Pretty bad.
So yeah, in this case, it was a lot of people drowned. They didn't get killed by the cyclone. So
is a king tide just a full moon high tide?
I don't think necessarily. Hang on. King tide is see results closer to you. No, Google, go away. I don't.
King tide in Cleveland. Sean loves Copilot. Oh, it's not Copilot, it's Gemini, isn't it?
It's Gemini, yeah. King tide is an especially high spring tide, especially in the Parisian spring tides, which occur 3 or 4 times a year. King tide is not a specific term, nor is it used in a specific context. The expression originated in Australia and New Zealand and other Pacific nations to describe especially high tides that occur a few times a year. It is now used in North America as well. Definition: king tides and movement. Yes. Exerted
I
by
wonder
the
if it correlates with the apoplecsis.
Like yes and no.
Probably.
Like tides are obviously caused by the combined effects of gravitational force of the sun and the
Was
moon.
that the right?
Apoapsis.
Or was it the
Periapsis is the close one.
I wonder if
The king tide occurs at new and full moon when the Earth, moon, and sun are aligned at perigee and perihelion, resulting in the largest tidal range seen over the course of the year. So tides are enhanced when the Earth is closest to the sun, around January 2nd of each year. They are then reduced when it's the furthest from the sun, around July the 2nd. The predicted heights of the king tide can be further augmented by local weather patterns. So, yeah.
King tide and the Joker tide.
King tides occurring a couple times a year based around,
I would love to be somewhere that gets those massive tides. Yeah.
Just quickly on tides, one thing that kind of like blew my mind a little bit I heard a while ago was how the tides actually work.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's the gravitational moon and sun.
Yeah.
But the water on the planet is actually like an oval shape.
Yeah.
And the tide is our Earth structure rotating inside
within the oval.
within the oval, which is just trippy as.
Yeah, it's cool. It's similar to our skeleton is actually not inside our body. We're inside our skeleton.
Yeah. Our brain is inside,
Yeah, brain's inside the skeleton. We're driving the skeleton.
Yeah. We're a
Icky alert.
we're a bone mech.
Yeah, we're a bone
with a meat.
We're Zoids, yeah.
With meat armor.
Yeah, we're Zoids.
Oh, I don't like that.
We're Zoids with the skin.
Oh, yes, Zoids. Loved Zoids.
Bring it back. Supplemental content. Man, our supplemental content this week is going to be like
I also
50
love
images.
Zoids, but I could never find it. Is that the one with like the big tiger?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a Liger, actually.
Liger, yes, it's Liger Zero.
Liger
Yes,
Zero.
I had
you
a
just
couple
unlocked
of
a
the
memory.
toys.
Yeah.
I had the Liger and I had the big elephant one.
My brother had the elephant.
walk.
I had the Liger, but it was like more of a model. You had to build it. And I remember that was the first time in my life where it took me like a long time to make it. It was
They were
really hard.
complicated.
I had a small Megazord. I really wanted the big Megazord that would come apart and transform into all the different dinosaurs.
I've got the intensity metrics for the mathematics of how the cyclone's calculated, and I'm looking at it and thinking, I wish I had my bloody textbook on me right now of rain and weather patterns.
Yeah, Sean notoriously loves weather radar and loves talking about it. So I gave him
Sean, can you pull up the weather radar right now and tell us what's happening? Because I drove through some rain on the way here.
I gave Sean a bit of a bait and switch for Christmas. He asked for a specific book, and I gave him a book, but it was a weather radar book that was mighty expensive if I got the hard copy. But I got a nice soft paper copy.
The hurricane surge index is a metric of potential damage a storm may inflict. It can be represented in the equation where V is the storm's wind speed, R is the radius of hurricane force winds. being V divided by 33 meters per second to the power of 2 times R divided by 96.6 kilometers.
Basically, higher winds, lower pressure means stronger storm.
Math.
Quick maths.
That's not quick. There's nothing quick about this. Can you record that soundbite and just use that in the future? Just the sound of my laptop hitting this.
Yeah, I can use that.
Sounds like the NFL doink.
And then cut that.
Well, getting back to it, let's talk about Darwin.
Damn.
I'm sure all of our Australian listeners know Darwin well, but for those who don't know, Darwin is the capital of the Northern Territory, which is, I said the state, but it's not a state, it's a territory in the central north between Queensland and Western Australia. Originally named Palmerston and eventually renamed to Darwin after the bay Port Darwin, in which it sits, which is also named after Charles Darwin.
And Palmerston is still there, I should point out. It didn't,
Still, they just move it.
No, I think Palmerston they ended up turning into a suburb of Darwin, or at least a town within Darwin, within the city of Darwin.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Sorry. It's interesting.
the city was founded in 1869. Nice. The city has a pretty rough history. We haven't done that for a while.
No, we haven't. No.
The city has a pretty rough history with a number of key events affecting a huge portion of the population. The city has had to be rebuilt almost entirely 4 times, with cyclones destroying much of the city in 1897 and 1937, and the Japanese also having their way with Darwin in World War II.
More bombs dropped in Darwin than Pearl Harbor.
Yep. Of course, the most recent time is Cyclone Tracy. It's a wonder anyone still lives there, but today the city is home to over 139,000 people and holds the title as both the smallest and wettest capital city in Australia. It's just a sopping city. In 1974, the city had a population of around 43,500 people, with roughly 12,000 homes to live in. As you can imagine, building standards were a little more lax in those days, and so while some consideration was given to cyclone protection, most buildings in the area were not built to withstand a direct hit from a cyclone. It was also, almost a perfect storm, pun intended, that would lead to the destruction of Darwin.
Are we doing the thing? Or was that too much work?
Oh, moving and never mentioning that we're moving?
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of want to do that. Well, I talked about what we should do is just, like, at various points, swap position, like we're a cyclone spinning, and just never mention that we're doing that.
It's too early for that. My coffee is only about here. It needs to hit here.
It's funny that most episodes we're drinking a beer. This time it's like, coffee, please.
Oh.
So, what about Tracy?
What about Tracy?
The clouds that would eventually form into Cyclone Tracy were first noticed on 20th of December 1974 by a United States environmental satellite over the Arafura Sea between Indonesia and Australia. A day later, the characteristic circular centre had formed and the first tropical cyclone alert was issued. Later that day, the spiralling clouds had formed around the outside and the pressure inside the low had dropped, and so it was officially pronounced as a cyclone. The next day, a weather radar in Darwin would observe Tracy for the first time, and the tracking began. At this point, it was some 360 k's north of Darwin. Northeast, I should say. Over the next few days...
I'm just working out. So
that way.
Yeah, north of Capricornia, pretty much.
We will have an image on socials that shows you the track
yep.
of Tracy so that you can get an idea of where it was. Over the next few days, Tracy would move southwest down the coast of the Northern Territory, passing by Darwin to the north on December 22nd. At this point, there was little thought given to it in Darwin, and as the cyclone continued to travel southwest, everyone seemed to think that there was no cause for concern.
Phew, it's gone past us.
With the ABC broadcasting over the radio that Cyclone Tracy posed no threat to Darwin.
Well done, ABC.
Pulling a Michael Jordan and taking that personally, Tracy decided on the morning of the 24th of December to take a hard left around the Cape of Fourcroy, which protrudes out to the northwest of Darwin, and start heading straight towards Darwin.
No threat, hey? Watch this.
What? At this point, the cyclone was measured at a Category 4 and would continue at that strength until landfall. So it was basically a 2 as it was coming in towards the north, and then as it took its hard left, it became a 4.
And the categories are determined by the wind speed near the eye?
I think it's actually just wind speed. I don't think they even count the low pressure.
Oh, no, yeah, it's just the highest wind speed of...
Yeah. It was also the smallest tropical cyclone in terms of gale force wind diameter ever recorded at the time, and to this day is still the second only to tropical storm Marco that I mentioned before.
Yeah.
Despite the warnings now starting to flood in from the media, the residents of Darwin weren't exactly preparing the way you would expect for a cyclone. Many were continuing their Christmas preparations, going to parties and preparing food like normal, despite the increasing rain and wind. Earlier in the month, another Cyclone Selma, had passed by the city to the north, despite repeated warnings that it would hit, leaving everyone feeling quite sure they had another non-event on their hands.
Okay.
Yes. Tom Richards, an army veteran from Darwin, was quoted as saying, "We didn't have a proper warning system back then. The news said it was coming, but no one thought it'd be that bad. We tied down what we could, but nothing could have stopped Tracy." Another resident, Bob Evans, said, "I filled up the car with petrol and made sure we had candles and a torch. But honestly, we thought it'd just be another blow. We never expected the whole city to be wiped out." So yeah, they're pretty much just there like, whatever, like this stuff happens. It's going to go by.
Yep.
And
just unfortunate that they had one previous that did nothing.
It did nothing,
Yeah.
And then this one's like, bad.
It was a boy who cried wolf.
Yeah.
And I watched that ABC documentary that I mentioned to you guys before.
did they mention that they kind of set it up for failure?
What do you mean?
Like they said, oh no, this is not going to happen.
Yeah, they were all saying that. They were like, yeah, everyone, like we had the warnings, but they actually had like an alarm that would go over the radios. And they were just like, yeah, that happens all the time. There's nothing to worry about. Don't worry about it. We'll be fine. And they were like, yeah, we were all kind of good until at like 10 p.m. things started getting ripped out of the ground. And then we thought, oh, this is pretty scary, hey?
Yeah, and by that point, like this is pre-information, right? Like this is analog radio at the time.
Yeah.
So a lot of the stations had literally just switched off.
Yeah.
All the equipment was switched off. TV.
And it was the night of Christmas. It was Christmas Eve.
So everything had been turned off because back then people just, actually stopped.
Yeah. Play the anthem, turn off the TV.
Play the anthem, turn off the TV, and we're like, cool, that's all really good. And we're all done. And we can just relax and spend time with our family instead of going, I need to watch late night reruns of The Bachelor. And it was great. But yeah, that meant that there was no information going in or out. And so when the destruction hit the next day, you got like, oh, crap, how's everyone going to know? And that leads into my personal information segment for when you're ready.
We will get to that.
Thank you.
By the afternoon of the 24th of December, Darwin was starting to look decidedly more grey. What?
Nothing.
Okay. As the overcast clouds and strong rain that precede many cyclones started to set in. As the afternoon became evening, the wind gusts started to become serious, and residents started to realise that it was going to not just pass by the city, but directly hit it. Between 10 p.m. and midnight, the winds got so bad that there was serious damage done to buildings. And at 3:30 a.m. on Christmas Day, the Eye of Tracy crossed the coast at Fanny Bay. By this time, the wind gusts recorded at Darwin Airport, nothing funny about that, had reached 200.
Nothing funny about it.
Boo.
So by 3:30 a.m., the wind gust recorded at Darwin Airport had reached 217 kilometres an hour. But soon after this reading, the anemometer, the wind thing, had its wind vane destroyed. I think it's anemometer. There you go. So yeah, the wind vane just got ripped and destroyed.
The anemometer.
That's the one. The anemone. The Bureau of Meteorology would later estimate that speeds reached as high as 240 k's an hour for gusts of wind, but there's no way to really know for sure.
Yeah, because they broke the thing.
Yeah.
That's like with Alfred that we just had.
Yeah.
I don't know what your experience was. It was originally Thursday morning was meant to hit.
We should point out John lives like
a bit further inland
than us. So our experiences were vastly different.
Very different, yeah.
But it's Thursday morning it was originally meant to hit. We eventually got some wind Saturday night about 10 o'clock, very similar to Darwin, right?
We got Friday night wind.
We had
there was wind, but it's like when it was making landfall wind type of thing.
It was supposed to eventually land on Saturday morning.
Yeah. We had big wind around Morningside, Carina, this area, sort of like early wee hours of Friday morning, Friday night, Saturday morning.
Yeah. Well, Friday night it was banging my door.
Yeah, well, I just remember the Saturday night I walked out at about 10 o'clock and went, it's really still, like easily still. And then I walked back inside and then I could hear the trees coming up the road, like rustling from the wind. And then I heard my roof go as the wind hit. I went, oh no. And then that was it.
Yeah.
It was just like that one big initial gust. And then it was windy after that. But it was
you said about the stillness. It was weird in the days leading up because Brisbane like shut down on Wednesday basically.
Yeah.
Everyone was like, that's it. We're not doing it anymore. I went into the city on Wednesday and it was like, it was dead. There was very few people in the city. And then the next 2 days, nothing happened. And it was just still. And it was quiet at night and there was no planes taking off anymore. Like, yeah, it was really weird.
I feel like it could have been bad. If it had continued as a category 2, especially after the delayed crossing, where everything was still and like you said, nothing was happening and we were going, well, this is a bit of a fizzle out. If it then just went whack, I think that could have been bad. Well, even though we'd all prepared.
I'm still happy that we all prepared.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, because like, so my suburb was in the like, the warning of like, if it hits landfall, it's actually going to go over like here. So I'm glad I prepared. And like, you know, like everyone's like talking about, oh mate, what a bloody fizzle out. Like, we've avoided, we actually did the right thing for a change. It was good. Yeah. We prepared because every other time we don't prepare.
Brisbane, like we're kind of used to everything else, like floods and stuff, but cyclones, it's like, oh God, what do we do?
Yeah.
Like my roof's going to come off.
Versus like other areas that like didn't prepare. And like there's reasons why they didn't prepare. So Harvey Bay got schmacked. And the mayor of Harvey Bay, shout out to the mayor of Harvey Bay. Look, I'm very sorry for the devastation, but they were like blaming the Bureau of Meteorology for not including them in the emergency warning zone. It's a moving storm. They're doing their best. Like, and so Harvey Bay
clearly hard to tell what this thing was going to do.
Yeah, and you're a coastal town.
It was doing donuts out the coast. It would literally, it did like 3 donuts before it crossed.
And it's a coastal city, and they didn't prepare at all, and then they got absolutely schmacked.
I can understand.
Schmacked.
Like, schmacked is good.
But they were so far away that you probably wouldn't expect to get hit. So like, it's gonna it just happened.
It just happened. Yeah. If I'm in a coastal region and I'm seeing everything from like Lismore through the Gold Coast through the Sunshine Coast get battened down, I'm probably going to go, storms, landfall, Fraser Island. I'm going to prepare.
Yeah. So at this point, the storm has hit.
3:30 Christmas morning.
3:30 a.m. Everyone's hunkered down at home. There were some stories that I heard. So across the duration of Cyclone Tracy, there was 255 mil of rain. And a teenager at the time, resident Sue Baker, would say of the preparation and then surprise at the damage, Dad told us to stay inside and not to worry. We had a few supplies, but when the roof started peeling off, all we could do was hide and pray. So there were stories of people like they were in their house and they were like, oh, you know, we don't need to worry too much. They were on the top floor. And then they were like, all our windows have smashed and the roof's starting to peel off. We better get down to the bottom floor.
I mean, that was a very real concern for my place. Even like you said, I'm 40 k's in.
Yeah.
But my house is like 100-year-old.
Yeah.
And I've only got lead tap-ins. I've only got like tap-ins holding my thing. It was a concern that our roof was going to come off.
I got a tile roof.
Well, that's a bit heavier than...
Yeah, I know, but tiles, like one goes and then they all go. But like nothing here is prepared. And that's what was happening in Darwin. They didn't have any cyclone prepared houses.
And like you were saying before, Brisbane area, I think just north of Harvey Bay is not built to a cyclone rating.
Yeah.
Once you go north of that, there are building
Bundaberg, I think.
Yeah, building regulations that require certain building techniques to prepare for cyclonic winds.
Yep. In Broome, every single building in Broome basically is made of corrugated iron. It's a frame with corrugated iron on the outside so that way if everything rips off, it doesn't demolish the foundation and the framing of the house. If it just blows everything away and then they can just tack some crap back on. Even McDonald's is made of corrugated iron.
But it's more of like bracing strapping as well. There's extra bracing strapping up north to be able to withstand.
Yeah.
Special like screws that have these like big
3 times as many nails and screws in roofs in Townsville as there is here.
And then you've also got your tie down. So in the southern areas we're here, tie downs are only on the bottom plate. Up north, tie downs have to go from the bottom plate to the top plate. So it's like one large rod. So sorry, a bit of building talk, but that's kind of my area.
So by 6:30 a.m., the wind started to die down, and by 8:30 a.m., the rain had ceased. The whole event had taken just one night, and the residents of Darwin would start to extricate themselves from the wreckage and see just how much devastation had been wrought by the cyclone they didn't expect to be such a big deal.
How did Santa fare in the cyclone?
Actually, there was one interview I saw, and they were like, yeah, I lived with my kid, my dog, and my husband, and my kid was just really worried about whether Santa would get blown away. It's like they're saying this while pictures of Darwin just smashed her on the screen.
It's pretty cute of the kid. Like, he's worried about Santa. That's kind of cute.
Yeah. So the first thing that would become blindingly obvious in the aftermath to anyone with eyes was that there was a lot of destruction. Not just some trees over and some power lines, but 80% of all buildings in Darwin had been destroyed. Mm-hmm. Of the housing that was in Darwin, 94% had been destroyed. 94% of houses. Did you say
there was
12,000 homes?
Yeah, there's only 30,000 people in Darwin at the time.
Quick math on that is what?
It was 43,500.
94% of 12,000. Quick math.
Well, what's 6% of 12,000?
Yeah. Well, I'm just trying to work out, like 10% is 1,200, half of that, so 600 houses left.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And they weren't just like slightly damaged. It was like roofs off, buildings down, like stuff everywhere. They were showing the roads, and like people couldn't drive their cars. They were saying they had to get their cars and put corrugated iron plows on the front and drive through. Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. 6 ships had sunk in the harbour, with one, the MV Neptuna, having its cargo of explosives detonate inside Stokes Hill Wharf.
From the cyclone?
Yeah, like something in the sinking caused it to, like I'm sure there was a short or something. At the airport, 31 aircraft were destroyed, with another 25 badly damaged. Electrical poles had been twisted and sheared off, and steel house frames had been bent like spaghetti. Clearly, this had been a very powerful storm.
Mm.
So please go to our socials to see some of the photos of the destruction.
Yeah, the airport would be crazy, because I remember that storm that rolled through Brisbane. It wasn't even a cyclone, it was just a bad storm.
Yeah.
And then Archerfield, all the planes were like
upside down
from it.
At Cheeky Tales Pod for our socials. I realise we haven't said that. Worse still, and Sean's going to comment on this, I'm sure, all communications out of the city had been cut off, with all antenna for long-range radio services being destroyed in the cyclone.
Antennae?
With most media outlets having a skeleton staff due to it being Christmas Day, it would be late in the afternoon before the country started to learn what was happening in Darwin. The first communications link to be re-established after the cyclone was at the airport, with a de Havilland Heron that had been stashed in a hangar having its radio still working. Pilot David Fredrickson would contact the Catherine Flight Service Centre by mid-morning and would spend the next few hours relaying messages from emergency services, Navy personnel, and airport staff. Elsewhere, Bob Hooper and Gary Gibson, amateur radio operators, would help to set up a makeshift radio station at the Darwin Community College, connecting to a network of stations throughout the country to start coordinating a response plan.
Good job.
One of the things that was said about this was they started communicating with the outside world, and everyone was like, okay, you've had a cyclone hit. Can you tell us what's really happened? Like, stop being so dramatic about, like, the whole place is flattened. We need everyone to come here, please.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it took, like, a while until they could get a plane in to get some film, fly it back to Sydney. They developed it in Sydney, and then they broadcast the pictures, and everyone was like, oh, crap. Yeah, wow, look at that.
They weren't being dramatic.
Yeah. So, Sean, you said you had...
Yeah, so amateur radio enthusiasts were able to get in contact with local radio stations. In particular, they managed to get signals down to Alice Springs, where there is a lot of amateur radio enthusiasts as well, including my wife's grandfather. We can't interview him, sadly, passed away several years ago, but he was part of the people, he was in the group of people using his amateur radio antenna based in his shed that was able to intercept messages from Darwin and then transmit them to emergency services throughout Queensland, through Longreach, Winton, down through Brisbane. The amateur radio community were like a huge part of what got everything together. They talk about like the de Havilland and the Navy radios and the Air Force radios, but the amateur radio people were the ones that sent out so much data.
The first few days was just amateur radio enthusiasts doing the work of communicating.
And if you know anything about the way that some people that have done nothing but watch movies call ham radios or whatever, but shortwave radio, like you've got VHF, UHF, high frequency, low frequency. The way that you transmit high frequency is like quite directional and quite challenging. So having a good knowledge of how to do it, you don't just simply turn it on and hope that it works. Like you've got to use directional antennas, you've got to use dipoles to correctly shoot everything out. So like the amateur radio enthusiasts are a big part of it because they understand how and where they need to send everything. John's building expertise, my weird radio knowledge. Very helpful.
I've done a little bit of radio stuff, part of working on the field.
Yeah, good fun.
To do a CASA course on it.
Yeah, so pretty intense stuff. They literally couldn't communicate with the outside world for a few hours after it happened.
And then the outside world didn't believe him anyway. So
Yeah. At the hospital, healthcare workers were sent into overdrive with over 500 people needing immediate treatment. While it would take until 7 a.m. for the conditions to be safe enough for people to start arriving at the hospital, 112 people were admitted to hospital with both operating theatres being used constantly. The local doctors would work without break until late in the day when a relief team arrived from Canberra. There was a whole bunch of people got flown out that were injured, and there was this one guy. He had his 2 daughters, and they all had to get flown to Sydney, and they were interviewing him in Sydney. And he was like, "Yeah, we were inside the house, and we were hiding under the bed, and then the roof got ripped off, and that was pretty bad. And then within half an hour, everything was gone, including the bed that we were hiding under. And we were just laying out in the yard next to the foundation of the house for like 4 hours during the cyclone."
That's crazy.
Yeah. And his wife sadly got bonked on the head by some debris and passed away.
Wow.
Yeah. So that is terrifying to me. Like,
there's nothing left. You're just in the open, in the middle of a cyclone.
With stuff just pinging around.
In the middle of the pitch darkness of the night type of thing.
Yeah. So someone was going to need to coordinate the emergency response, and so a committee was put together to do just that. High-level public servants, police, and emergency services would work together. Additionally, all Defence Force personnel throughout Australia would be recalled from leave, and many were sent to Darwin to help with the cleanup and bring in supplies, including Sean's dad.
Including my dad. Who sadly is on holiday. We'll interview him later.
We'll have a supplemental at some point in the future.
Yeah.
Maybe that can be part of episode 100. The Navy would send 13 ships to transport supplies, eventually completing the largest disaster relief operation ever undertaken by the Australian Navy, with the incredibly creative title of Navy Help Darwin.
I don't think it was said that way, but
I think it was called Operation Navy Help Darwin.
Yeah, but not like Navy Help Darwin.
Navy Help Darwin.
You said it.
With so much of the city destroyed, there was roughly 30,000 people now homeless, and they needed to be set up in emergency shelters, which would unfortunately have little to no proper hygiene thanks to the power, water, and sewage systems being offline throughout most of the city. Water would be brought in via tankers, and trench latrines would be dug to allow the most basic services. But there were bigger fears of illness outbreaks, so immunisation programs began targeting typhoid and cholera. Additionally, the whole city was sprayed with malathion, a chemical used to control the population of mosquitoes, who I'm sure would be ready for a field day in the drenched city.
You say that, though. I feel like the mosquitoes that are bred in the water we had from Alfred have hatched, because I was out working the other day near like swampy area. Man, I had one Scotch grey mosquito land on me. I thought it was a moth. It was that big. Like it was humongous.
Yeah.
And they were everywhere.
That is the thing with a lot of these cyclones, is that once it's done, it's not done. No. There's just new things that come along, like, suddenly we have an outbreak of scarlet fever or something. The army was also tasked with searching for the bodies of people and pets in the wreckage of houses. While they were there, they were also asked to clean out the fridges and freezers of the city to ensure that there would be no rotting food, adding to the issues faced. Once the army had gone through a house, they would spray S&C on the wall for searched and cleared. Despite that immense task, they would complete that work within a single week. So by the end of the year, they'd already gone through every destroyed house.
Good job, Australian Army.
Yeah. Can you imagine that? Like, hey, go in there, see if there's a dead body. Oh, and also clean out the fridge.
Get rid
it
of
would
the rotten.
stink by like the fourth day. Ugh. Elsewhere, city officials would start to attempt to reconnect essential services later on Christmas Day. First, they would clear debris and re-establish power connections by rebuilding the downed power lines. After this, they would seal off damaged water hydrants and reactivate pumps that ran the city's water and sewage systems. This would be essential for the recovery to come. They actually were talking about like the power station had to deal with itself, get itself back online. But then obviously there was no power lines left. So they had to bring in power line guys to just fix every single power line in the city. So they had to rebuild poles. They had to put the lines back up. They had to connect everything again. Like,
and they use weird poles in the NT. If you have a look at the photos, they have this like twisted power pole and you're like, that's a weird looking power pole. So the NT, like SA, use what's called Stoby poles rather than wooden posts. They're basically steel girders with concrete in the middle.
Oh,
They're called a Stoby pole. They're very strong. So when you see the twisted one in the particularly the Wikipedia page, it's fully twisted by the storm. You're talking about it's like literally two humongous steel girders. It's like they're at the base. They're as wide as that television with concrete concrete in the middle of them. Yeah,
I have seen pictures of that.
Yeah, don't hit one. Don't hit one in your car. You have to pay back the state if you damage it, and it will bankrupt you.
yeah, it's probably not your biggest concern if you hit one.
That's a supplemental bit of information there.
Also, just don't hit any power pole.
Yeah, well, they do that here too. If you hit a
if you hit a wooden you have to pay
for
back
the inspection and then possibly replacement.
It's $100,000 if you hit a Stoby pole.
Yeah. And you know what? It's not that hard to not hit a power pole.
If you have it swerve out of control, we're not getting into that.
Cheeky Towel says no.
Cheeky Towel says
No, thank you to hitting power poles.
But yes, if you see that picture, you're like, that's a weird looking power pole. Use Stoby poles.
Yeah. The rest of the country, though delayed in finding out about the destruction, would start to fundraise to assist in the relief efforts. Small towns along the roads out of Darwin, so particularly the Sturt Highway. Is it the Stewart or the Sturt? Stewart Highway. Would offer food, fuel, and rest stops for those evacuating by road. Reception centres were set up in nearby towns and cities to welcome in the evacuees and help to resettle them. Alice Springs would raise $105,000 within the first 24 hours, which is the equivalent of $650 in today's money, to help those relocating and rebuilding. The Boxing Day test in Melbourne, part of that summer's Ashes series, saw players from both teams collecting money along the boundary to be sent to the victims.
Lovely.
So we're going to get into the evacuation now, but these people were saying like, so people evacuating by road, where were their cars during Darwin?
Yeah.
Outside.
Yeah.
So there's all these cars that are just smashed, like windscreen's gone, the roofs are stoved in, and people are like driving out of Darwin in these cars. So all these towns, they would just like come in, have food, we're going to fix your car. And they would just like get the car running again. They go, all right, off you go. And then they'd piss off to Darwin or to Adelaide or whatever. Pretty cool stuff. So about that evacuation. As you can imagine, it's pretty hard to run a city when most of the buildings are now the equivalent of unbuilt Lego. So there was going to need to be some evacuations.
Nice visual, boy.
Yeah, well, that's what it looks like.
Yeah, well, no, I get it. I'm being serious. It's a nice visual. Like you can picture it.
In order to coordinate the evacuation and start the recovery, Major General Alan Stretton, the Director General of the Natural Disasters Organisation, and the Commonwealth Minister for the Northern Territory, Rex Patterson, great name, would fly in late on Christmas Day to take control. They would assess the situation and, with the advice of Dr. Charles Gerd, the Director of Health in the Northern Territory, would decide that a safe level of population for Darwin in its current state would be 10,500 people. The evacuation began on the 26th and was completed by air and by road.
You said it was earlier on, it was 40,000, so a quarter.
43,500.
Yeah, so safe population is a quarter of what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. The Salvation Army and Red Cross were also taking part in the evacuation, the Red Cross being responsible for keeping track of where everyone was going. So they would be like, what's your name? Where are you going? What's your new address going to be?
Yep.
And people would be like,
we don't know. Yeah.
Maybe Sydney? Priority was given to women, children, and the sick and the elderly. Men were expected to stay and help the recovery if they were physically able. There were stories of men dressing up as women to try and
so the Titanic
evacuated. Yeah. Yeah. Ansett, RIP, Qantas, TAA, RIP, MMA, RIP, would send planes to start the evacuation. and those flights would be oversubscribed to help with the lack of flights. The airport was still experiencing communication issues, and so only one plane could take off every 90 minutes. So some flights took off with more than 150% capacity.
Wow.
There were stories of like 747s taking off with like 650 people in them, which was a record in Australia at the time. On the 31st of December, there were only 10,638 people left in Darwin, with 25,628 evacuated by air and 9,734 by road. After the evacuation was completed, a permit system was put in place to restrict access to the city to those involved in the recovery only. So essentially it became like a locked off zone, like do not come here, which you can kind of understand.
Yeah.
So now they're moving on to the recovery. So they've got everyone out. It's like, all right, what do we do? By the end of the week, on December 31st, Major General Alan Stretton would see that the immediate recovery, evacuation, and reconnection of essential services had hit a point that local officials could take over control of the city again. And so the Defence Force would hand over control back to the local elected officials. From here, there would be a long road to recovery for the city. The removal of the debris would be the main concern at first. However, by February, the attention had turned to rebuilding. Gough Whitlam, the Prime Minister at the time.
It's still a long time, like December to February, just removal of debris.
Yeah.
Like that's...
So they had like army bulldozers and stuff brought in to just scoop everything up and get rid of it.
Push it into the ocean.
Yeah. There was talk about just going,
you just build a new city.
we're not going to do this. Like, let's just go somewhere else.
Yeah,
Leave
build
this
somewhere
here.
else, yeah.
But Gough Whitlam was like, absolutely not. You are going to rebuild. And so they set up the Darwin Reconstruction Commission in February of 1975 with the goal of rebuilding the city within 5 years. Temporary housing was brought in, along with caravans, hotels, and even an ocean liner to house those returning to the city. And by May of 1975, the population was back to 30,000.
Oh, nice.
By September, very little had been rebuilt, with the focus so far being on infrastructure and temporary housing, and the Commission would face criticism for its slow response. By April of 1976, though, 3,000 new homes had been rebuilt, and repairs had been completed on all that remained standing after Tracy. Part of the delays had been the need to draw up new building codes to deal with the danger of cyclones, which aimed to ensure there would be no destruction like Tracy ever again in the city. By 1978, the city had rebuilt enough to recover to its pre-Tracy population, but in the following years, up to 60% of those that had lived in Darwin in 1974 had left to resettle again in other cities. So there was like, everyone came back, and then slowly they all left. I guess just being like, it's not what it was. I'm scared.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Bit of PTSD. You'd think in those years of rebuilding as well, you've got all the temporary housing and all that, and you've got people obviously working to rebuild. I wouldn't imagine there would be too many other jobs to do.
That was one thing that they said. They were like, you know, the people that stayed, particularly in that first few months, they just worked from sun up to sundown, ate and slept. And there was just nothing else to do. And
But like, surely there'd be some sort of grocery stores and all that for food and all that. But like other jobs.
Yeah.
I wouldn't imagine.
There's nothing else to do there.
No, there's nothing else to do, yeah.
I would imagine school would potentially be happening, but not like it should. Or
well, the schools weirdly were one of the things that just were fine. Like, because they were different. They would
government
different
buildings. Yeah.
Yeah. They were more like,
if it was like anything like Queensland, it's just a Besser block.
Well, they were, the one that I saw was just like a big concrete building.
Yeah, big concrete.
It survived.
That's what I'm saying.
It was like
just
this shot
a
of
rectangle Besser block cube.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were showing this shot of the city and it's like destroyed houses and then the school just sitting there.
Yep.
Yeah. I imagine that first year was very tough. And like you'd come back because you want to be there, but then what do you do? Like there's nothing to support. So you don't get a job. Yeah. Another consequence of Tracy was that the governance of the Northern Territory would change. When Tracy hit in 1974, there was a legislative assembly which had very limited powers. The real legislative power for the Northern Territory was still in Canberra, with the federal minister being given control of the territory. After Cyclone Tracy, it was clear that this approach had a lot of drawbacks, and so in 1978, the territory was given self-governance, allowing them to control their own destiny. So they were essentially like, we should probably have control of this place in this place. So they gave them their own control, which they've still got now. While the Darwin of today holds little resemblance to the Darwin that was destroyed on Christmas Day in 1974, the scars still run deep for those that survived. Many records held by the government were released in 2005, giving some more information for those that still held questions around the recovery. Just this past Christmas was the 50th anniversary, and a memorial was unveiled at East Point Reserve where Tracy made landfall. Despite the destruction, the real memory of the day is the 66 people who died on what should have been the happiest day of the year. So despite this destruction, there's only 66 people.
Yeah.
Which is crazy to me that so few died.
Yeah, out of a total, like we said, total population of 40,000.
Yeah.
95% of the houses destroyed. Like, that's not a bad outcome. It's still sad. But
yeah. It's pretty good to only lose 66 when 94% of houses are gone. Yeah. Anyway, that's Tracy.
That was Tracy.
Yeah. The whenever people talk about cyclones here, it's like Yasi, Larry, Tracy.
Yasi was
Debbie.
the one in Townsville.
Oh, yeah, Debbie was pretty bad.
Debbie was big.
No, Yasi
was
like,
further north.
Yeah.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, it's further north.
Like Innisfail? Is Innisfail further north?
Yeah, Innisfail's further north than Townsville.
What was the bad one in Townsville? Was it Debbie then?
Debbie was
sort
of Debbie. Yeah, Debbie hit Townsville. It was 2016. 2017. But it hit all over the coast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's weird looking at the stats of like the cost of these cyclones. Like obviously Yasi's number one, but number 4 wasn't even a cyclone. It was a tropical storm. Like it was a low. It was Oswald in 2012, 2013. It started like up in the Gulf, went inland, like in the Northern Territory, did a loop, came back out, and then just ran down the entire length of Queensland into New South Wales.
Just smashing the coast.
No, inland.
Inland.
But it was
right.
low,
Yeah.
and it just kept sucking water in and kept damaging things and causing flooding and like wrecked the Kingaroy region. That was the one that caused the 2013 floods in Ipswich.
Yeah, right.
Because it just came down the coast, and they talk about like cyclone damage is about who it hits, like where it hits, not about how strong it is.
Yeah, so Yasi hit the coastline in Mission Beach, which is north of Townsville, and Debbie hit at Airlie Beach, which is south of Townsville, about 4 hours.
Yeah, right.
Lovely place to live. I mean, holiday. I don't know if I'd want to live in Airlie Beach.
It really is. It's like a paradise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Choppy seas sometimes, though.
Well, there you go.
Backpackers.
That's Cyclone Tracy. One thing I remember too about another big one was Katrina. Like we heard a lot about that.
Oh, yeah.
Is I think a lot of people were surprised how big that, because that was quite a large cyclone too.
God, Katrina got,
It was
big.
And now I remember them.
It was a Cat 5 that hit New Orleans.
Yeah. I remember them overlaying the entire storm over Australia, and it like covered the entirety of mainland Australia. Just like that big boy.
Hurricane Katrina, because it got caught in the Gulf in between, like it got stuck in the Gulf of Mexico and just went and just demolished it. It was like Sonic stuck in a box.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
Yeah. And the Gulf is quite shallow and warm, so it just sucks it up. You get quite bad ones there. That's where Milton came from recently.
Katrina killed 1,400 people.
Yeah, wow. Weather, man.
Yeah.
Can be scary.
Yeah, $125 billion of damage.
That was the most expensive one. That's the record, isn't it? That you said for the most expensive.
It is tied with Hurricane Harvey as being the costliest tropical cyclone in the Atlantic Basin. It's the 12th tropical cyclone, the 5th hurricane, and the 3rd major hurricane of the 2005 Atlantic hurricane season. And the 4th most intense one to hit the contiguous United States. So that means not including Hawaii and like Puerto Rico, places like that.
Yeah. Anyway.
So that would have been fun for you writing this and learning about all this destruction.
You love storms.
I decided I love weather.
No, but like writing all this destruction and how bad it was and all that while
waiting for it to hit you. Yeah.
And you're like,
yeah. There's a reason I wrote this episode. And we had to, obviously we couldn't record because even though it never really hit, we got some flooding. So it was kind of awkward to try and all get together to record. But they were like waiting for it to hit. I'm writing this story. I'm like, this could get pretty bad here. Yeah.
Did it mention what category was Tracy when it hit?
4.
Oh, so it was a category 4 when it hit landfall. Okay.
So the highest category is 5.
That we know of.
No, there is a limit to how powerful they can get.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, it's pretty hectic when they're a Cat 5, like 250 km/h winds or something. Like, yeah. I think we got hundreds here, and it was like, oh yeah, that's a wind.
That's a wind.
Yeah. Anyway, good stuff.
Thanks for flooding us with that information.
Yeah. Boo. All right, well, let's spin on out of here.
Let's wrap it up.
Good night.
Good morning.
Take it easy. You've been listening to Cheeky Tales Podcast. If you'd like to see supplemental images related to our episodes or to interact with us about our episodes, hit us up on @CheekyTalesPod on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. You can watch our episodes on YouTube or listen to them on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.